Hello everyone, welcome to this week's session of Turn Your Body Woes into Wins. My name is Stephanie Mercurio. I am a certified nutrition specialist candidate. I have a master's degree in human nutrition and I specialize in women's integrative nutrition, health, and wellness. Today we are going to be discussing the Mediterranean diet and how you can use this dietary pattern to help promote more positive health outcomes into your life, whether it is you wanting to learn how to eat healthier or you're dealing with some sort of chronic disease or autoimmune disease. The Mediterranean diet is an excellent dietary pattern to model your own eating around. It is the dietary pattern that I model my own eating around. I recommend this to nearly every single one of my clients to hopefully have them model their own eating around it, because every year it is proven to be one of the most healthy diets in the entire world. And I'm so excited to talk to you guys about this today. So I'm going to give everybody a chance to kind of log on here. Hello, Brigitte. Hello, Jacqueline. Hello, how is everybody today? My internet was being a little funky before, so I'm sorry if you logged on and I wasn't there. I had to turn off my Wi-Fi. Today is such a beautiful day and I'm feeling good. Energy is good. I get this diet for PCOS. Yeah, that is, it's honestly, I have yet to come across really any condition that wouldn't necessarily benefit from the Mediterranean diet, and we'll definitely talk about why that is in this session. I needed a little afternoon boost today, so I have a cup of chai tea. I've been on a chai tea kick. Even though it's warm today, I still needed that warm beverage to get me going for this session. I meant different doctors recommend it. I'm glad to hear that doctors are recommending it. They should be. Brigitte, I sped home from work to make it home to watch. Oh, I love you. I'm so excited that you get to watch it. I'm actually curious to see if maybe 3 p.m. works out better for people, because I know that 12 o'clock is usually not, or I notice it maybe not be ideal for people. I know a lot of my own clients that want to watch are at work. So we might have to play around with times. I need all the help, so I logged in perfect time. Yes, absolutely. Well, I think you'll definitely enjoy today's session, and I hope that you learn a lot. And if you have any questions at all, do not hesitate to drop them below in the comments, or feel free to DM me after. My social media is always a safe space. I will guard my own clients and my audience with my life. So this is always a safe, non-judgmental space with me. So never hesitate to reach out to ask questions or ask for additional support. And if you feel like that you need it after this session, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you for sure. So thank you so much for joining. Okay, let's get started. So as I mentioned in my introduction, the Mediterranean diet is the dietary pattern that I not only model my own eating after, I'm also Italian, so it helps. I was raised on this type of a diet anyway. Excuse me. But it's not uncommon for other people to follow what we know as the standard American diet or a westernized dietary pattern. We will be talking about what that is too and what characterizes that type of diet. But it is how I model my own eating. I obviously heavily practice what I preach, very much so. It is the reason why I decided to pursue higher education and get an advanced degree in human clinical nutrition, because it is how I live my life. And it is typically, for the most part, the dietary pattern that I am recommending for most of my clients as well. because every year it comes up as one of the top dietary patterns to follow for influencing positive health and for also practicing what's called preventative maintenance, if you will, as well. So the Mediterranean diet, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, although it seems though that many people already are familiar with it, which is amazing. The Mediterranean diet is the dietary pattern that is customary to the 16 countries that surround the Mediterranean Sea. Pardon me for just one moment. I have my music on a little bit too loud and it's distracting me. It is customary to the countries that surround the Mediterranean Sea, and it is essentially characterized by a daily or frequent daily intake of fresh in-season fruits and vegetables, whole grains, fish, olive oil, and also herbs and spices in replacement of table salt. And then less frequently, we're incorporating dairy sources and perhaps poultry like turkey and chicken. And then on a much less frequent basis, probably a little bit more restricted basis, if you will, is red meats like beef and lamb, anything that is processed. So like any like sausage. Sausage would be considered a processed meat, or hot dogs, processed foods in general. I should actually be a little bit more meticulous with that and specific. Ultra processed foods, I should mention, like prepackaged foods and foods that have added ingredients and added sugars. Also, red wine tends to be consumed on a moderate basis as well. I think moderate can probably be interpreted in different ways. But from what I've seen, it generally speaking means that we're having roughly a glass of red wine with meals. So it's usually only one glass, and it's not saved up, if you will. Like, they will typically enjoy a glass of wine with dinner each evening. You can't save up your glasses of wine or your alcohol consumption for the weekend and then binge drink. That's not how that works. So by moderate intake, I mean enjoying a single glass, probably like a 4 to 6 ounce pour of red wine. And that's because of the antioxidant properties of wine, resveratrol, and also probably because it relaxes you, and it's generally speaking well, I guess in the short term it would be relaxing, but may be able to help you kind of lean back and de-stress, decompress. Let me know if this is all making sense. Drop me a couple comments or send me some hearts. Let me know that all of this is landing, or if you need me to clarify anything. You know, the thing about food is that it is a necessity of life. And many people look at food as more or less a way to satisfy their taste and satisfy their hunger, and aren't necessarily concerned with food for its nutritional benefits on their bodies. And that is at the very core and basis of everything that I do. And I find, can't store up on your wine servings, darn, nope. And I should say this, like, I teach you guys this stuff, but please understand that I am far from perfect. I'm definitely not drinking a glass of wine every single night, but I may enjoy a few beverages, usually one night a week. I really can't do more than one. I don't by any means binge drink any longer, thank God. I just wouldn't be able to survive. I'm good after like 2 or 3. Realistically, like 1 is probably perfect. I can't believe I'm saying that. 10 years ago, I was a completely different person. Oh, so funny. All right. So when I'm teaching you guys nutrition, when I teach my clients nutrition, I use macros, and this question always comes up. It's like, Steph, you work with women that are complex cases that have, these serious symptoms and conditions and diseases that they're dealing with. Like, why do you still talk about macros and flexible nutrition? And because macros are nutrition 101. When you decide to pursue nutrition, in higher education, the first class you're going to take is Nutrition 101. And realistically, it is the class that we never got growing up in school. Like, it should have been a part of health class. I mean, maybe it was. I personally don't recall learning about it in high school, but I think that if it was a part of the conversation, that perhaps maybe we wouldn't struggle so much with our relationship with food. So the reason why I teach macros and the reason why I love the Mediterranean diet so much is because, well, one, macros give us a soft guideline and a safe space for us to really wrap our brains around how much food our body requires. And when I'm teaching macros, I'm not teaching macros for you to use them to restrict yourselves. I'm using them to teach you what is most optimal for your body. Because we have to get out of this idea that food is just there to satisfy hunger, appetite, and that it's also there to influence how many inches we have on our waist. People are very concerned with foods based on how they perceive it's going to influence that number on the scale, or how many inches that they have on their waist, or how their clothes fit. And so it's common for people to use macros and calories as a way to restrict themselves and hold themselves back from foods and different food groups, right? Especially carbs. So when I'm teaching them, we're taking a little bit of a different approach in that I want you to be able to have a structure, a masculine structure to hold you so that you know where you're safe. And then we use the Mediterranean diet because the Mediterranean diet, although it does, I don't even like to use the word restrict, although it does de-emphasize the intake of certain foods, it also emphasizes the diverse intake of a variety of different foods. And often, many of these foods are foods that people would restrict themselves from anyway, in fear that it's going to impact their body composition in a way that they don't want to. Oftentimes whole grains, bread, people will cut out fruit. I've heard of people thinking that fruit was bad for you. And so the Mediterranean diet really emphasizes the intake of carbohydrate containing foods because much of our nutrition is going to come from this food group. Your fruits and your vegetables are going to contain antioxidant substances and polyphenols, which are nutritional components or compounds that compose those foods that actually can help regulate our metabolism, influence health, help us manage our immunity, especially for those of you that are dealing with an autoimmune disease such as Hashimoto's or systematic lupus erythematosus, anything like inflammatory bowel disease related like Crohn's or colitis. These are foods that are actually going to help your body manage your immune response in reaction to those, in reaction to that particular disease. Let me know if this is making sense. I learned about the food pyramid when I was in the US, but that was it. That food pyramid is far different. So there's actually a Mediterranean diet food pyramid, and that it varies greatly from the actual food pyramid now. Which there's also a lot of controversy around the original US food pyramid and why that was actually created. you could really go down a rabbit hole with things. I try not to get too wrapped up in conspiracies. However, I am that person that likes to see things from both sides. I like to see things from all perspectives. I want to be able to have as much information as I possibly can. And then I want to make my decision based off that information. And we're actually going to be talking about a couple of controversial things here a little bit later on in this call regarding oils and gluten, because these are two big questions that I get not only with my own clients, but with people asking me questions from my stories, especially with the Mediterranean diet, because it does recommend the intake of whole grains. And so a common question is like, well, if you're recommending whole grains, like what about like gluten? I thought gluten was bad for me and blah, 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 blah. So we'll talk about that too. All right, cool. So I guess this is all landing, which is really great. So a couple of fun facts about the Mediterranean diet that I love so much. So there is a difference in science when we're studying nutrition. It's actually really challenging to draw conclusions around nutritional studies because people are really hard to study because oftentimes we make errors in reporting, or we're not consistent, or we fall off, or, whatever, right? So we're living, ever-changing beings, and studying us can be really hard. And surprisingly enough, I mean, it honestly shocks me because I'm like, here I am. I'm like, I've been practicing nutrition for almost 7 years. And sometimes I read a study and I'm like, well, how do you know if you're not, controlling this? Like, they'll study a certain diet, but then like not control certain parts of the diet. And I'm like, that's kind of important if you wanted to figure out if it's like actually going to work. Like artificial sweeteners is a really big one. So there's like the big controversy around artificial sweeteners, if like they're good or bad for you. And like science, like you have those people that are like, oh my God, artificial sweeteners are like evil and they're poison and they're going to kill you. And then you have people that are like, no way, like artificial sweeteners are freaking awesome. Like rock on, do your thing. And like, I kind of fall. Oh no, I'm hearing that the live stream is glitching. Can you guys let me know if you can hear me? I don't want to continue unless... Okay, hello, I'm going to try this again. Let me know if you guys can hear me. I turned my Wi-Fi back on. I was having connectivity issues before, so I turned it off, but maybe... Honestly, my Wi-Fi's been wonky all week. I can hear you glitching quite a bit on my end. I'm going to just give it another second. Let me know if this is better. Yeah, I was actually wondering if Mercury was in the refrigerator. Is Mercury in retrograde? Yes! I was having a conversation. Ashley, I saw you join before. I don't know if you're still here. But that answers our question. Yesterday, I had a face-to-face call with one of my VIP clients. So if you join VIP, we do monthly 45-minute face-to-face calls via Zoom. And not only were we both late because both of our computers weren't working, but like it was a disaster. Like we were trying to review her progress on the app and the app wasn't working. And I was like, I wonder if Mercury's in retrograde. My Wi-Fi has literally not been working all week. All right. Thank you guys so much for bearing with me. I hope that this works. And thank you so much for Brigitte for texting me and telling me that this wasn't working. Okay. Well, where was I? Looking at my notes. Okay, we were talking about artificial sweeteners. Okay, so you have those people that are like, oh my God, they're so bad for you. And then you have people that are like, no, they're fine. Like, don't listen to the crazy zealots. And I fall somewhere kind of in the middle because here's the thing. The studies that have been done on artificial sweeteners aren't exactly the greatest things because they use dosages that would be far higher than we would actually end up consuming. So the deleterious effects that are observed in these studies, which many of them are done in rats, and although like an animal model isn't necessarily the worst kind of study that we can refer to, it's also not necessarily synonymous with human function, right? So not only that, but they use dosages that would be far higher than what we would actually be consuming. So what can we really tell about that? But then I also know my own personal experience eating, a diet that, perhaps was higher in ultra processed foods. I've dieted before for contest preps, and artificial sweeteners do help. Especially when your calories are super low. But I also know that those are the times that my health also greatly suffered too, mostly related to my gut health. And perhaps maybe it's not directly related or caused by artificial sweeteners. We're not really sure, right? So that's the whole point, is that we have nutritional studies that discuss these topics and they want to present a conclusion to you, but they don't necessarily result in causation. We can maybe merely speculate or have some sort of correlation or association. So that's kind of the issue there with nutrition studies, right? So the reason why the Mediterranean diet is so impressive is because there are multiple studies that have been done on the Mediterranean diet in which it has been very tightly controlled and randomized and blinded. And one of the most popular studies or famous studies is the Lion Diet Heart Study. And it was actually able to prove that the Mediterranean diet was in fact directly related to the reduction in inflammation in folks that had suffered from a heart attack, as well as reduce the risk of developing cardiovascular disease or the progression of the disease. And that's why it's so impressive, because although I'm not by any means do I specialize in research at all, it's impressive to me that they were actually able to prove that, because I've read so many studies that are just freaking God-forsakenly awful. So there's that. And the Mediterranean diet does often pop up in pop culture. There are articles written about it, and it is always typically rated as one of the most healthiest dietary patterns. And I have dozens upon dozens of different textbooks on everything related to nutrition. And I can safely bet that the Mediterranean diet is mentioned in nearly every single one of them, because not only is it efficacious in helping us reduce the risk of developing cardiovascular disease, which, by the way, is the number one killer in the entire world. Millions of people die from heart disease every single year. It has also been shown to be beneficial for folks that are also dealing with other chronic diseases, many of which are risk factors for heart disease, but also autoimmune diseases as well. And we're going to get into why. So we mentioned that the Mediterranean diet is characteristic of high intake of fresh fruits and vegetables that are typically in season, beans and legumes, whole grains, including breads and cereals, potatoes, nuts, seeds, rice, fish, cold pressed extra virgin olive oil, and herbs and spices, with lesser intake of poultry, low-fat cheeses, and then sparing intake of saturated fat sources, such as that from animal protein and ultra-processed foods and added sugar. Okay. It also incorporates regular activity and exercise. And fun fact, if you didn't know this, there are actually 5 different countries or locations. One of them is not a country. One of them is actually a place. You might be surprised where it is. There are 5 places in the entire world that are considered, they're called blue zones. And it's where people typically not only live an average of 10 years longer than everyone else in the entire world, but are actually also more commonly found to live to at least 100 years old, which is freaking impressive. And the thing is that they live that long, but their quality of life is also quite high. They're not sick and bedridden and, unable to move or do anything. They're actually mobile. They live a high quality of life right through up until they pass. And those are called the blue zones. And they are in Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, Icaria, Greece, Nicoya, Costa Rica, and Loma Linda, California. That's the surprising one. And essentially, these communities of people, although many of them, so Greece and Italy will follow more of a Mediterranean style diet. The other locations as well essentially have very similar pillars to their dietary methods as well. There was a study done on the blue zones as well that so that they could actually come up with 9, they're called the Power 9, the 9 guidelines to living a healthier, higher quality life. And they based it on these five blue zones. Super interesting. Maybe we'll save it for another live session. So that's what the Mediterranean diet is. So why the hell is it so beneficial? We obviously know that like eating our fruits and vegetables is like super healthy and good for us, but like why? Like what is the reason why? And it's because the Mediterranean diet and dietary patterns that are high in fresh fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, beans, legumes, whole grains, blah, 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 are high in fiber. They're high in antioxidants and polyphenol substances. They're high in monounsaturated fats, and they're high in vitamins, minerals, and short chain fatty acids. It's okay if you don't know what these things are. We're going to kind of explain it a little bit. And the Mediterranean diet and similar dietary patterns are going to be lower in saturated fats, lower in trans fats, if any at all. They will be lower in added sugar and lower in ultra-processed food ingredients. And again, the reason why I recommend incorporating an understanding of what your personal macros and calories are, especially at your maintenance level calories, is because when we eat at maintenance level, and we have an appropriate stratification or ratio of macros, protein, fats, and carbs that we're eating, we are giving ourselves the best chance to achieve what is called optimal nutrition. And optimal nutrition has a definition. Optimal nutrition is when a person receives and uses adequate nutrients obtained from a varied and balanced diet across carbs, fats and protein, vitamins, minerals, and water in such a way that it provides your body with all the necessary energy and all of the necessary nutrients that your body needs for positive health outcomes and minimize disease prevalence. That is the definition of optimal nutrition. Remembering that macronutrients are there to help give us a guideline to understand how we can adequately feed ourselves. Because macros aren't there as a restriction. Macros are there because they're actually daily recommended intakes for each nutrient because they're energy and nutrient containing substances that your body requires. I feel like this is super groundbreaking for a lot of people when they hear about macros in this way, because usually we're just talking about macros in such a light that it's like it's related to your body composition and like bodybuilding nutrition and can I fit in my favorite snack? Like, can I fit in a couple servings of Oreos into my macros? That's usually how you're hearing about it. Like when I first learned about what flexible dieting was and what macros were, I remember like reading articles about people that were eating Pop-Tarts every single day, and like you would see a picture of them and they're shredded. And now obviously I am so much more educated in this. And back then I had no knowledge of nutrition. I didn't even study nutrition yet at that point. I was still learning. It hadn't even stepped on stage yet as a competitor. And I was like, how are these people so shredded and lean and like huge, right? Like super jacked people. Little did I know they were actually on freaking steroids. And they're eating Pop-Tarts every day. How do they do this? It was so confusing to me, especially because a packet of 2 Pop-Tarts is literally like 100 grams of carbs. And I'm just like, now looking back on that, like I remember I was like, oh my God, I can fit Pop-Tarts into my macros and like be so excited that I can eat these like shitty ultra processed foods every day. And like, if you're down with Pop-Tarts, that's totally cool. Like that's part of the beauty of flexible nutrition, is that you can choose to follow a super healthy dietary pattern and eat, you know, modeling the Mediterranean diet or modeling a healthy dietary pattern like this. But, you know, maybe one day you really are in the mood for a Pop-Tart, right? And you can eat that Pop-Tart guilt-free because you know that you have the freedom and the power to make that food choice for yourself. You can take it or leave it. There's no stress, there's no guilt, there's no remorse, and there's also no like FOMO. Because that, for me, that was the big thing, like fear of missing out. I've been the girl that orders like, you know, the chicken salad at dinner when everybody else is enjoying like a burger and fries. And like, I'm like upset because I probably really should have ordered the burger and fries and just have like gotten over the fact that it, like I didn't get it because it would make me feel guilty and I would be worried about how it would affect my body composition. I would be worried about that. I would also be worried about how it impacted my digestion. Okay, so just to give you a little review, and also in case that you did not download my free guide to food and body freedom, which if you have not, I have a free downloadable guide that teaches you how to calculate your own macros and calories in minutes. It is the exact method that I use to calculate this for my own clients. You can either drop a comment below, just say freedom, and I will email you, or rather I will DM you a copy of it, or you can just pop into the link in my bio and you can download it that way. I think it's like the 3rd or 4th link down. And you can download it there. But just in case you don't have that guide and you don't know what your macros are, general recommendations for fats, carbs, and protein. So your fat is going to want to compose roughly 20% to 35% of your daily intake of calories. Carbs are going to compose roughly 45 to 65%, and protein is going to, they recommend 10% to 35%. I think 10% is probably too low for most people. However, there are certain conditions, such as those who suffer with like chronic kidney disease, or in certain autoimmune diseases where kidney function suffers, eating a higher protein diet may not actually be appropriate for you. So there would definitely be some specific individualized implications there. But general recommendation for protein is 10% to 35%. And even for folks that have like pancreatitis or issues with fat digestion and malabsorption, even erring on the lower end of fat might be appropriate for you too. Depending on, I know that there, I think it was Jacqueline mentioned that, you know, she suffers with PCOS. Sometimes there in PCOS, there are blood sugar regulation issues. Oftentimes PCOS is concurrently diagnosed alongside type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes or high blood sugar, in which perhaps it might be appropriate to control carbohydrate intake as well. Although I have worked with people that have been pre-diabetic, who have had type 2 diabetes, that have had PCOS, and we've been able to incorporate moderate carbohydrate intake. This is typically alongside an adequate protein diet as well. So again, very individualized nuances to nutrition. Everything that I am making on my stories, on my Instagram, in any of my content, in any of these sessions, they're always going to be very generalized recommendations, because nutrition is super, super individualized based on your personal health needs, your personal morals and values, and perhaps your experience. You know, I'm not going to take a person that has suffered with orthorexia, somebody who has really struggled with their relationship with food, and, you know, have them start like vigorously tracking their macros and calories, because that might actually exacerbate their, you know, orthorexia or their disordered eating patterns, right? We have to take different approaches with different people. So all of this is very general recommendation. Okay, what's next? All right. So like I had mentioned before, not only has this diet been shown to be beneficial for folks with heart disease, but it has been also shown to be a useful strategy in reversing high blood pressure, high cholesterol, irregular blood sugar, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, and also autoimmune diseases, such as psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus erythematosus, allergies and asthma, irritable bowel diseases, or inflammatory bowel diseases, IBD, and also hyperuricemia, which is high blood uric acid, which is usually the cause for gout, which is a very painful, almost arthritis-like sensation in the feet and other joints as well, swelling, pain, redness. And the reason for this is because the Mediterranean diet is something that can be considered as a anti-inflammatory diet. Now, you hear this term thrown around a lot, and I typically am hesitating to use these types of words because they are often used as buzzwords. They're often used by gurus on the internet that don't always necessarily know what the hell they're talking about. So I use these terms sparingly, but in truth, the Mediterranean diet, in comparison to a Westernized diet or the standard American diet or the SAD, it always makes me laugh that the abbreviation for standard American diet is SAD, is that the Mediterranean diet is going to be more capable of reducing inflammatory biomarkers, which this has actually been measured in scientific studies, such as the Lion Diet Heart Study that we discussed briefly before. And the reason for this is because the diet is very high in healthy fats and omega-3 fatty acids, which actually help modulate our inflammatory response. You've probably heard that omega-6 fatty acids are really bad for you and they produce or promote inflammation. So this is very, remember that I always like that when I'm looking at a controversial subject, I am wanting to know all the things about it. And then I typically am falling somewhere in the middle. Okay. Now, as somebody who studied fatty acids on a biochemical level, omega-6 fat, linoleic acid, or LA, is an essential fatty acid. Your body does need omega-6 fats. Here's the problem. The problem is that the standard American diet or a Westernized diet is going to be very low in omega-3 containing fats. And so the ratio of our intake of omega-6 fats in comparison to omega-3 fats is going to be imbalanced, and thus the consumption of fatty acids that are of the omega-6 family will actually be pro-inflammatory. Remembering that we need inflammation in the body to heal from things. So not all inflammation is bad. Inflammation is bad when it's chronic. Okay. And so consuming a diet that is high in omega-3 fats can help us offset that. So in order to heal from something, you need an inflammatory response, but you also need to have anti-inflammatory substances as well to help reduce that inflammation and clean up after your body has healed whatever injury that you've suffered. So that is the whole kind of, in a nutshell, understanding regarding that. And although I would say that it's very challenging to really monitor your ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fats, there is an outline of what might be most ideal, and it's a 1 to 4 to 1 ratio of omega-3s to omega-6 fats. The Mediterranean diet is also very high in trace minerals such as iron, copper, sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and molybdenum, which are trace minerals that the standard American diet is void of. And again, that's because the Mediterranean diet is going to be very high in fresh fruits and vegetables and whole grains and overall carbohydrates that contain these trace minerals, many of which are important for our cellular regulation of our immune response. And when it comes to managing a autoimmune disease or a chronic metabolic disease, such as type 2 diabetes, managing that immune response and that inflammatory response is really what is going to be key. And that is why that's why the Mediterranean diet is so efficacious in reducing inflammation, is because of all of these things. And typically what we find is that when the Mediterranean diet is paired with pharmacological treatment, that people that suffer from a chronic disease or an autoimmune disease is going to have much more positive outcomes in comparison to people that do one or the other. I have seen in certain situations the Mediterranean diet work without medication. I did have a client last year who was pre-diabetic and had pretty significantly high cholesterol levels and triglyceride levels and high blood pressure as well. And we were able to not only regulate her blood pressure back down to normal within 3 months, but she was also no longer pre-diabetic and her cholesterol had significantly improved. The test wasn't fasted, and so therefore her triglycerides, her total cholesterol actually came down. LDL cholesterol was back in range. HDL cholesterol was also higher, which was good, because typically what we see is total cholesterol is too high, LDL is too high, VLDL cholesterol too high, HDL is too low. So all of those markers actually work themselves out, and then we saw elevated triglycerides, which when the test isn't fasted, isn't a huge concern in my opinion, especially if a meal that was eaten prior to the test contained fat, you're still likely going to be digesting that food. So to me, that wasn't tremendously alarming. And we followed it up 3 months later with a test that was fasted and everything had improved. So she was able to accomplish that without medication. That is a very individualized experience. I have seen that in other cases that I've studied in school. I have seen that with other clients as well. But it may not be true for everyone, especially with people that have familial history of cholesterol, which is very aggressively or severely elevated cholesterol. Being on a statin medication to help you reduce that is probably going to be something that you'll need to do alongside improving your diet and lifestyle as well. Cool. Oh gosh, we did it. I have some stuff here at the end too that I wanted to mention to you guys about. So a big thing that I hear about is, okay, oils. We hear a lot about how seed oils are bad for you or vegetable oils are bad for you. This is not true. So a big one that we hear about, right, is canola oil. Canola oil is so bad for you. It is super inflammatory. Well, here's the problem with a lot of commercial oils that we see on the shelves. They are typically processed using heat and a gas called hexane. And unfortunately, this changes the biochemical structure of the oil, and it may not it may influence our health in ways that we don't necessarily want it to. The oils may also be rancid as well. So what I recommend is that you, one, want to make sure that it's a cold pressed oil. So the processing method is going to be a little bit different. So spending more money listen, I question myself every time I'm grabbing the more expensive bottle of extra virgin cold pressed olive oil off of the shelf, but this is going to be the better choice over just a commercially processed oil that unfortunately went through that processing. So that's kind of the difference. In fact, when it comes to the health benefits of oils like canola oil, they find that canola oil is actually one of the healthiest oils that you can have. But again, it has everything to do with how it's processed. You can get cold pressed canola oil. It is very pricey. Also paying attention to smoke points of oils as well. Olive oil will have a smoke point of roughly 400 degrees, which is going to be one of the higher ones. I want to say avocado oil is also another one too. When you're cooking, you just want to make sure that you're not bringing that oil to a smoke. You will literally see it start bubbling and smoking, in which you would just want to throw that away and start over. You don't want to be You don't want to, that's why also too, like with friolators at restaurants, like that oil is reheated constantly at such high temperatures. And that's also another reason why fried foods are something that I personally don't eat too much of. Not necessarily because it's not healthy for you, but more or less because my gut doesn't agree with it. But the reason why fried foods and also foods that are cooked in commercial vegetable oils is for that exact reason, is that it's heated repeatedly over and over and over again. That's the problem there. To answer the question regarding gluten, so the Mediterranean diet recommends that you eat whole grain foods or whole grains. So you can eat whole grains that don't necessarily contain gluten. Realistically, gluten should not be an issue for you unless you have celiac disease, you've been tested for celiac disease and you were positive for celiac disease, or you have something that is also called non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which is a thing. There are people out there that will make fun of people for saying that they have gluten sensitivity, but it is actually a real thing. And there's speculation as to why. And perhaps we can go into that in another call, or I can certainly make content on it. In fact, I know I will be making content on it. But it is actually a real thing. And so there are people that report having a sensitivity to gluten. They've been tested for celiac disease. They're not celiac. So what really is the problem there? Usually what I'm personally seeing, and also my suspicions, are that we then should probably look at the overall health of the digestive tract. Typically people that struggle to digest gluten don't have adequate stomach acid and don't have adequate digestive enzyme output during digestion, which would make it very hard to actually break down the proteins in the gluten. In the grain. Typically the offensive protein in whole grains is called gliadin. And that is what is most responsible for celiac and non-celiac gluten sensitivity. There are such a thing as non-gluten containing grains. That's amaranth, buckwheat, flax, millet, quinoa, to mention a few. And then one thing also worth mentioning, short chain fatty acids. The Mediterranean diet is also going to be higher in short chain fatty acids. Short chain fatty acids are metabolites, if you will, that are produced by your colonic bacteria, so your gut bugs, your gut bacteria, and your gut bacteria will ferment on, so these are like undigestible starches or resistant starches that you would get from like potatoes and rice that you've cooked and then cooled. Some other foods contain it as well. And fiber, which is not going to be digested in the gut. So you have enzymes that are released by the pancreas that break down all of your macros, proteins, fats, carbs, and break down, like, so for example, when you're eating a piece of chicken and you don't just eat the chicken and then it just comes out the chicken, right? Like you chew it, and then you have substances in your body that break it down into its most smallest unit. So like protein is broken down into amino acids. Carbohydrates are broken down into glucose. Fats are broken down into fatty acids and triglycerides, right? So you have specific substances that break that down, that process. Well, you don't have enzymes that break down fiber or resistant starch, but it's really good for your gut bacteria, right? So your gut bacteria ferments on these foods and they produce what's called short chain fatty acids. And short chain fatty acids actually help nourish the colonocytes, or your intestinal cells. That's what the cells of your intestine are called, colonocytes. And so again, another health benefit of the Mediterranean diet is that it's going to provide that, whereas the standard American diet is going to be higher in saturated fat, which puts you at higher risk for cardiovascular disease. It's going to be low in fiber. It's going to be low in antioxidants and polyphenols and all of the things that the Mediterranean diet provides you. The standard American diet unfortunately lacks, which is the reason why it is so pro-inflammatory. Wait, if the olive oil gets that hot, what happens if we use that? again, the smoke point for the olive oil is going to be roughly 400 degrees. You would have to literally put it in a pan and have it on high heat and then walk away from it and forget about it. You will see it smoke. You don't want to use it. You want to throw it away and start it over. All right, folks. Well, that ends today's session. This went a lot longer than I wanted it to, but it was such a good conversation. I'm so happy to have all of you guys here, and thank you so much to everybody who joined me. Next week, we are actually not going to have a session because I'm going on vacation. Matt and I are going away on Sunday. We'll return the following week. So we will resume Turn Your Body Woes into Wins the following week. I think the date is the 26th. So we will be resuming Turn Your Body Woes into Wins on the 26th of May. So you get a break from me next week as I will be away. If you are interested and need more support, I am accepting new clients for the month of May and would love to have you join my VIP one-to-one program. In my VIP one-to-one program, you get daily access to me. So you literally have your coach in your pocket, so you get text and voice support from me via the Voxer app, which is a text and talk walkie-talkie app. So if you have any questions or need support or you need a little education like we had today, you can literally reach out to me at any time. And because I'm a person that hates notifications on my phone, I'm usually responding to you like that. I also really love what I do. And so it's hard for me not to have conversations with my clients. I spend most of every single day talking to someone. You also get weekly check-ins with me every single week via the SM Nutrition app. The SM Nutrition app is like MyFitnessPal on steroids. You can track your food and your macros. It has a barcode scanner, just like MyFitnessPal. It has a food logger. You can take a picture of your food whenever you're about to eat it. It tracks your body weight. It tracks your progress photos. You can sync it with wearable items such as the Apple Watch, Fitbit, Garmin, and I believe also Google Health is accepted now as well. You can also access your training program there, and it has all of these awesome exercise tutorial videos, some of which are me, and some of them are Matt, and some of them are these like stock videos that I haven't had a chance to replace yet, but I'm working on it. So you have that. You can have me design your program for you, or you can create your own. There's a calendar so you can schedule workouts in there, and you can set your own goals and all things. It's awesome. So you get access to the app where all of your program is built into, and we also do check-ins every single week for accountability purposes, and also for me to make sure that we're making progress and to coach you along. And if I need to make any adjustments to your program, we can do that. And then every single month, you can also jump on a 45-minute face-to-face call with me via Zoom, where we do an in-person consultation every single month to make sure that we have all of our T's crossed and our I's dotted, so that I can provide you with face-to-face support, which I know for a fact is support that you're not going to get with any other nutritionist on the internet, especially not any of those Instagram influencers. They just write you cookie cutter plans and, they don't give an F about you. But this is not that kind of a program. This is a very intimate program that's designed for very ambitious women who are busy and do not have the time to waste, don't have the money to waste, don't have the energy to waste figuring out or trying to figure out what doesn't work for them, but also just not feeling good either. Often I am everyone's last resort. They've gone to doctors before. They've had countless blood tests run just to walk out of the office with no answers, and still dealing with their symptoms and living in pain. And typically it's at that point that a person says, well, I wonder if there's anything that I can do by improving my nutrition and my lifestyle. I'm going to reach out to Steph. And if you're in that space, then I would love to have you in my VIP one-to-one program. Majority of my client feedback is that within the first 1 to 2 weeks of working with me, they already see results. They already experience improvements in how they're feeling. And so if that is you, you can DM me VIP and we can talk about how we can get you applied and ready to go. If you're not quite ready for VIP yet, I do also offer a 90-minute nutrition makeover, which is a 90-minute consult with me where I'm still looking over all of your things, like all of your health history, all of your current information on your health status, any existing lab work that you have done. And I look at the big picture, and then you and I hop on a 90-minute face-to-face Zoom call, and I design a protocol for you and also give you specific accountability measures so that you can guide yourself along at your own pace. So I highly recommend the 90-minute consult for someone who is a self-starter, doesn't necessarily want the intimate setting between coach and client, and wants to have a little bit of autonomy to do this on their own. And also don't forget that you can download my free guide to food and body freedom so you can calculate your own macros and calories. And if you are wanting to have access to the SM Nutrition app where you can track those macros, I can grant you access to that as well. It's a lot cheaper than MyFitnessPal. MyFitnessPal wants to charge you $20 a month to use their stupid barcode scanner. Well, my app does everything and more, and I only charge $7.77 a month for it. So if you're wanting access to the SM Nutrition app, again, you can comment below SMN or shoot me a DM and we can get you started there. All right, folks, I love you very much. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am looking forward to catching you guys in 2 weeks. All right, everybody have an amazing weekend, and I will talk to you soon.